Thank you, Mr. Chair. When I wrap up here, I'm going to refer back to what struck me as most compelling from when we had Director Hall in here. I want to stop me if I'm incorrect in terms of getting a few things out here that are simple for the public, I think, to understand. We just hit $22 trillion in debt, and we're roughly running $1 trillion deficits annually. I believe that from 2011 to 2018, discretionary spending has actually dropped by 17% and would have dropped more had the caps not been bypassed in 13, 15, and 18. Is that true?
So the only thing I would say is that the debt held by the public, which is what we use when we calculate debt to GDP ratios, is about $16 trillion.
And it's 22 when you're referring to
is the total debt. That's right.
Intragovernment
That's
debt.
right.
Correct. Okay.
But all the spending numbers seemed okay.
Okay, good. And the fastest growing part of our budget would be in mandatory spending. And with the rate of inflation that we've had, and I think I read here, and I can't recall if you mentioned it, is going up roughly 6% a year.
Right.
I mean, that's astounding. Most people would not know that, and that's something that is on autopilot. And then interest on our debt, of course, now that interest rates have risen, will about equal defense spending down the road soon. And that, in a way, is kind of mandatory spending because unless you're going to default, you got to pay it.
Right. We do not consider that discretionary. That's right.
Okay. And ranking member, before he left, cited that we need to do a whole lot more through government. And for the ranking member and others that think that that needs to be the case, I'd say if you are interested in doing that down the road, you better look for a healthier institution to maybe conduct what spending you want to do. And this idea of trying to pile more and more responsibility on to the federal government that's $22 trillion in debt, or 16, depending on how you look at it, running annual trillion-dollar deficits. Do you think that's a prescription for anything working out well when it comes to government finances?
No, I mean, I think CBO has said multiple times in the past that we think that the debt is on an unsustainable path and that Congress is going to have to confront some hard choices about some combination of increases in revenues or decreases in spending. Given how high the debt is getting, it's hard to imagine easily doing that on any one side of the budget.
Very well put from an expert, and I'd agree 100%. I don't think any of this conversation can be had in the vacuum of not talking about revenues. And implicit in everything I hear on the other side is that there's a ton of capacity to increase revenues. And I think in places where it might be fair to do it, you look and you talk about it. But I asked Director Hall in the last hearing if you taxed 100% of income in the top two brackets, that you could not close the gap on our current deficits. Don't know if you've looked at that or if, but you know, he did say that that wouldn't do the trick. And then in looking at revenue enhancement, it is difficult for me to find any model where there's not avoidance, there's less enterprise, to where you even get close to 20% of the current deficit. Have you looked at that yourself, and would you care to issue an opinion on that?
No, that's not my area of expertise, but I'm happy if you want, we can get some of our tax
I've asked my staff, and I'd love for you to do the same thing, because until this is going to really sink in what dire straits we're in, I think you've got to point out that you can't solve it through revenue. We are in a intransigent, stubborn deficit that we've not felt the pain of yet. That'll start happening when interest rates tick up another % or two, and you add another $200 to $300 billion to what we currently pay in interest. So I'm going to bring to the committee here and would ask you to do some work on the counter argument of what could happen with revenue, so you can clearly make the case that this is a spending issue. We bypass caps, and until we get it in line, we're going to pay huge consequences down the road. Thank you.